This is Chewing the Gristle with Al Black and Tim Conroy. This is a poetry chat. And our poet this week is the poet Robert Lee Kendrick, who has a new book, a new collection. It's called Shape the Bent Straight. Robert Lee Kendrick is a poet and teacher in Clemson, South Carolina. He grew up in Illinois and Iowa, spent his teens and 20s playing guitar and songwriting in punk rock bands. After attending the University of Iowa, he earned a BA in English from Illinois State University in 1993 and a PhD, 18th century British literature, from the University of South Carolina in 1998. After graduate school, he returned to music, performing throughout the Southeast as an Americana singer-songwriter while holding down jobs as a grocery store worker, house painter, and line cook. In his mid-30s, he settled into teaching high school English and began writing poetry in his mid-40s. He is published in a number of journals and publications. He released a chapbook, Winter Skin, with Main Street Rag Press 2016, a full collection, What Once Burst with Brilliance, Iris Press 2018, and Shape the Bent Straight, Main Street Rag Press, June 2020. He has received the Tennessee Williams Scholarship in Poetry for the Sewanee Writers Conference. And while not teaching, reading, or writing, he races bicycles, plays guitar badly, and obsesses about Iowa Hawkeye basketball. We want to welcome you, Robert. Tell us about your poetry journey and education, and did you write any poetry in high school and college? And who were your early influences in poetry?
Well, Al, man, thank you so much. One, for having this program, Chewing the Gristle. You are such a champion. No, I didn't write, try to write a poem until I was like a junior in college, and then I just wrote some terrible ones, and then stopped trying to write poems. When I was in high school, and also when I was getting my undergrad, man, I really had no focus. I kind of liked my English classes, but I nothing really hooked me, and I also didn't really make any kind of an investment in them. I think I was proof, if you're moderately intelligent and middle class and white and male, you can fake your ass through a whole lot. I tried to write lyrics in high school, but I never tried to advance beyond like Ramones level profundity. Now, one part of language that really did grab me, and literature that did grab me, was I did a lot of drama. My sister did plays, so I started doing plays, and I loved being able to lose myself in a persona. Have some basic technique, and you find the right role, then you can actually achieve more emotional depth than you might off stage, right? And I found that out in a couple of plays where, I thought I was a pretty, shitty teenage actor, and I was. But then in a couple of shows, the work that our director, who'd done professional theater for years, did with us on developing a technical vocabulary. And they were the right parts. And after those productions had their run, she was like, you you may not be shitty. You might think about, continuing. And then I didn't, because I think I kind of was shitty. Then I got in college, and I was a general studies major. I have a piece of paper that certifies I can generally study anything, for whatever that's worth, right? And I tried a creative writing class, and it seemed to click. I almost got an A in it. I think I had like 2 A's in college, and they were both, oddly enough, in fiction writing classes. And a couple of my fiction writing instructors encouraged me to keep writing and were gracious enough to let me mail them stories for feedback after I graduated. And I kept with that as I was, playing in bands and writing really, absurdist, inane, vulgar, lyrics, trying to be entertaining. And I started grad school, and my undergraduate grades were so crappy that Illinois State University made me go for a year as what they called a student at large, to prove I wasn't an idiot before they would let me into the master's degree program. And my initial focus, was fiction writing. I thought, well, yeah, that's gonna be, they took the portfolio I gave them, and had a couple of classes with a guy there named Kurt White, terrific short story writer. I got hit by the discouragement bug at all of 24 years old. And I remember one night I'd been working on a draft to submit for a workshop, and I said, God, screw this. If I'm going to be an unpublished mediocrity, it should be in literature. Because I take it or leave it about the study of literature. I really care about fiction, and I don't want to suck at that. So I haven't, boom, just punted. And, got my master's degree in English, didn't try to write anything, got into the PhD program at South Carolina, and, your friend Lawrence Rue had to suffer through my just pretentious ass in a Renaissance, mainly a Spencer and Milton class. And I figured out in graduate school that, if you're, I don't know, somewhere between average and sort of kind of bright, but you learn how to spin the right critical frameworks, you can get that shit published. And I mistook that for a sign of intelligence, and got, really insufferably full of myself. I wasn't trying to write fiction, wasn't trying to write poetry. I was this critical theory head, and Ed Madden might say I partially redeemed myself with occasional, rampages of baked goods, because I was taking some culinary classes on the side. But I finished my PhD, and my heart really wasn't in trying to study literature or even trying to study critical theory, which is what I thought I was really into. And so in 1998, I was like, man, I got to pay the bills. So I got a job at a grocery store in Columbia. And I was teaching at Midlands Tech at night. And I thought, what am I going to do now that I'm a big kid? And I was like, I don't know. And I went back to writing songs. And I started out with kind of these country vulgar novelty songs. And there was a guy in Columbia named Hickory Hawkins, terrific songwriter who, and Hickory had started with that kind of material. And he was like, hey man, these work for what they are. He's like, but, he said, you're a heartfelt guy. Why don't you try writing songs from your heart? And I said, why? This stuff works for you. And he was like, yeah, and I'm sick of it working for me. Don't spend the years that I've spent getting into this box of doing novelty kind of songs, or kind of parody, almost kind of songs. I mean, sincere, heartfelt parody, but still, you know, kind of thing. You know, so I invested a couple of years in trying to be a singer-songwriter, and proved that if you just practice a lot, you can find enough people to pay you to get up and do something for 2 or 3 hours. And, you know, it kind of got to the point, 2000, where, you know, I mean, I did a little over 100 shows that year. I was starting to get into you know, places where you're not in the background, you're actually, you know, there, and people pay attention to see. And, you know, my wife was kind of like, you know, it would help if you had a real job, man. You're 44. So I jumped into teaching high school, and just did that. You know, I wasn't playing music. I mean, I hadn't, you know, tried to write anything remotely sort of kind of literary, you know, since 1990. And man, I think it was 2007. I needed to renew my teaching license in South Carolina, and I saw there was a like a 2-week thing at the governor's school. Man, it was only like it was 1 week. 1 week at the governor's school. This intensive creative writing workshop for teachers that Scott Gould and Mamie Morgan ran. And so I thought, man, that sounds like a better way of renewing my license than, you know, taking some kind of pedagogy class. And I did that, and I wrote a story for Scott. And when we had the 1-to-1, he was like, hey, you know, you could write this. Keep working with this piece. You could get this picked up. But for some reason, what really bit me were the poetry sessions with Mamie Morgan. And so I had just started teaching AP English literature, which is, truth be told, the class that really taught me how literature works. I didn't learn that for my master's or my PhD, because all that's at such a level of abstraction. And so I bought a bunch of books. You know, it's Perrine's like Sound and the Sense. Started with that. Bought these other books on basically how to write a poem. You know, and I found somebody to help me with manuscripts. I really didn't get a whole lot anywhere with it, but I did get like 2 poems published. Kind of beginner's luck. But by 2000, midway through 2009, I stopped trying to write anything, because I really hadn't found a support group or a mentor to work with. I kind of did that until 2011, when I started teaching at Daniel High School here in Clemson. And because I had a couple of poems published, they gave me creative writing. And I kind of faked my way through that for a year. And then I thought, you know, dang it, you know, if I'm teaching something, I should actually try to understand what it's all about. And also I thought, okay, you know, you got 2 things published, and I don't know how that happened, but if you can do that, you know, maybe give it 10 years. I said, okay, and it's 2013, January. I said, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to read and you're going to write for at least an hour, hopefully maybe like an hour and a half or 2, every dang day. You know, it doesn't matter what comes out, just work. Because if just practicing a couple hours a day for a couple of years, you could do these, you know, shows as a singer-songwriter, and you were basically crap, right? If you do maybe kind of have a little ability for poetry, if you work at that, maybe it won't be crap. Maybe it will be resoundingly average, which I hope I am. And so that's how I got to here. I just started. I made myself accountable, and I just started working. And I got lucky that I met a couple of mentors digitally. One guy I've never met in person was an editor for me for about 5 years, and then I got introduced digitally to William Wright, who's been my mentor and main guy, guru, since 2015, and thanks to, I think, some very gracious and insightful editors, and just to plugging away every dang day, you know, things got to where they are now. So that's
I love that story because it's such a great story for the emerging poet to hear. Can you describe for our listeners your poetry style? Or do you have a poetry style?
Oh, um, uh, I put it down and it seems to click. I mean, um, I've tried to develop a metapoetic awareness. Truth be told, it kind of vanishes when I sit down and start drafting or revising. It has to. This is going to sound this is so easy. Right words in the right order. It's got to sound right, and it's got to have the right rhythmic flow, even though it's not formal verse. I guess the poets that when I discovered them, they made me think I could kind of sort of imitate that, maybe good enough to where it didn't suck. Were like Richard Hugo, James Wright. Right? I mean, those are my first two like poetic, real grab me loves, and so, I mean, I'm still a closet fiction writer. I think I'm a fiction writer with a really short attention span because I can't write a paragraph. But I do a lot of narratives, and I think going back to high school theater and community theater and playing songs as a singer-songwriter, persona really works for me. I mean, I don't think my own life is all that terribly interesting, and even if it was, I don't want to hang it out on the page for people to see. I can end up getting out whatever's on my mind or in my heart through finding the right persona. So I do a lot of persona poems as well, and with those personas, I still think in narrative arcs. I mean, when I find a persona that stuff is starting to click and I feel it's starting to go somewhere, I kind of like try to get into that guy's life and skin as far as his conflicts will take me in poems. And when I run out of gas with that cat, I try to find another.
For you, what distinguishes a good poem? For Robert Lee Kendrick, what makes a good poem?
Well, I mean, for when I read somebody's poem, I mean, I would say as a writer, I mean, I've got a pretty limited range, but as a reader, I'm just kind of a general poem slut. I mean, what's a good poem? First sound, the sound of the language, the play of assonance and consonants, and the pulse of the line. And something surprising or something that grabs me with the syntax. If those things fall together, and they can fall together in a whole hell of a lot of ways. I mean, there are more different ways to be a really good poet than we can figure out how to count. Then if those things are clicking and I'm pulled into that speaker in that poem, and I'm pulled into that language, it's going to take me someplace. It's going to immerse me in the human experience of that persona in that poem, and it's going to open me up to something that, I mean, we've all felt and experienced most things that a human being can feel and experience, but we're not always so darn aware of it. And the job of a poem is to make it not just fresh and new, but arresting and vital and startling, and just to pull us by the gut so that we feel we've experienced that thing in this new and powerful way, as if we're experiencing it for the first time. And I mean, for me, that's what a good poem does. And I mean, there are a hell of a lot of good poets out there.
Well, there's a lot of good poems in your new collection, Shape the Bench Straight. So let's hear a couple poems now, if we.
Okay. I guess a little bit of background. This is Shape the Bent Straight from Main Street Rag in Charlotte, run by the wonderful M. Scott Douglas, who is also a massive champion for poetry. These are all third person. It wasn't finding a persona, but I found a character. I tried to jam together two former students of mine. One boy who came up with what he thought was a really good idea to solve his mom's money problem and his brother's pill problem that blew up in his face, and another boy, also a Vulc Ed student, who was taking culinary classes, and I asked him, what do you really want to do after high school? And he's like, I want a food truck. I was like, why? Because he's like, I could be my own boss. And he did it, and he's not doing it now. I mean, it failed, but I tried to ram those two together and create a narrative arc. And so all of these poems try to develop the arc of this character as he goes through his journey. This first one is called Aperture. Let loose from the truck bed, Jacob's black hound lopes and hops over fresh fallen snow, explores old ground now rippled, dimpled, bright with its own cool luster. Jacob doesn't call him back. No running deer or hogs. No commands. He has just let Diesel go. He watches each leap and roll, smokes. Unwashed blood on his mouth and nose. The man with the black dragon sleeves on his arms has Jacob's knife, his money, the stash he took from his brother's room. Should have been at least $500 for his mother, a few weeks to keep Daniel from pills. He spits red on snow. He can't cover his mother's back bills. He can't make his brother go clean. He watches the dog circle back, run, circle back. It doesn't know how to leave, just knows how to please, always returns to the same hands that tighten its chain. The open field blinds, the unceasing soft click of snow marking seconds. Beneath the wind's drone, a low crack, like a shell breaking open or falling apart.
That's wonderful. That image of the dog always returning to the hands that pulls the chain. What a great line. How about another one?
Okay. One that's a few pages later in the sequence. Outflow. Boone's Creek slides over rocks, gravity locked on its mark, obeys the path of least resistance, runs straight when it can, bends when it has to, until it finds a thin patch of rushes, dumps itself in the Seneca River. If I squeezed the moon like a trigger, Jacob thinks, the sky would smother its own empty click. Purple hooks under his eyes, nose crooked like the creek. The water's cold riffle, a rat carcass drying on rock. Picked clean at night, new wind lifting blood scent from bone.
Very
That's
nice.
wonderful. Brother Al.
Did you have another one chosen, or can we go on with another question?
Sure, I'll read a third one. Title the collection came from. I'll give a shout out. I'm so thankful to independent literary journal in Kansas called the I-70 Review that published 5 of these poems and had me in there as featured poet with my picture and my full face in there with a couple of guys that I don't know that I'm in their league, but I'm thankful I was in there with them. This one was originally published there. Solstice. December blazing star sways in the ditch. purple tops glowing in equinox gray. Jacob, 18 today, watches their dance from Braxton's front step as he lights one unfiltered after another, a ring of stubbed butts at his feet. The aster, electric, more luminous to him than cheap Christmas bulbs. He will not waste money on ornament, gifts, not a thing for his brother or mother. Not welcomed this year, not paid his fair share, what he owes to his blood. Her only grounds to her claim for 100 each month that she'll give to her older son, who will waste it on pills that her boyfriend will probably steal, take himself, sell. She has her own job. He has his. He will no longer listen to the stories she matches to yearbook photos, 20 years old, homecoming court, best eyes, how she missed graduation to deliver his brother, how neither of them were the man her grandfather was, how it was his due to cover a piece of her bills, how he'd never managed without her, how your name's not Jacob, it's Judas. The length of Oconee County between them now. A year's secret savings to Tri-County Tech, culinary certificate hours paid in full before January's first class. As the day's shadows lengthen, he carves bark from an uneven hickory stick. He will sit with the moon until he has shaped the bent straight, until he has brought out the circle inside with his knife. He releases gray curls from his mouth, studies each one double back on itself, disappear into the dark.
That's wonderful. So when you're writing, how much revision do you do, and when do you know that a poem is finished?
I mean, revision, man, it all depends. I mean, I'd like to think that a couple of the best poems I've ever written, one that got into the Atlanta Review and one that Adam Vines picked up for Birmingham Poetry Review, and one called Spore that's at the Valparaiso Poetry Review. Man, those needed tinkering. It was change a word or two. I mean, some, I think it's, again, sometimes you find the right voice, you find the right persona, you find the right subject matter, and the sucker, it writes itself. I mean, you get these wonderful gifts from all the false starts and hard work and ones you do 20 dang drafts of and they still end up sucking. They just suck in a different way at draft 20 than they did at draft 1. I mean, it's all that work that enables some of them just to, pop out, like Venus fully formed from the clamshell, and, you don't know how that happened. I mean, when I'm drafting, it's usually all handwritten. And sometimes I have trouble reading my own handwriting. So the second draft on is all like typed. And if I hear an awkward cadence, I mean, back to music. It's the pulse, the rhythmic pulse. Does the line? I mean, I think just like poems have an arc, the line itself has an arc. The sentence has an arc. The phrase within the sentence has an arc, and every beat, every syllable has to propel that arc. And I think sometimes the wrong word is a matter of you have one beat too few, or you got one or two beats per too many. It's not, you don't have a rhythmic trajectory to the line or the sentence or the phrase or the clause, whatever. And sometimes it's sound. Do the vowel sounds in that word ring as tonally wrong? I really think about sound and music as I write before connotation, denotation. And I mean, at that stage, it's are these words getting to an emotional truth when I look at it, I mean, if I can look at a poem and go, well, it has American Bandstand growing up. It's got a nice beat. I can dance to it, give it a 99. It's got decent vowel sounds, but man, emotionally, that's a weak ass cop out. Sounds pretty, says nothing. And if I can see it doesn't say anything, a reader's going to see that. And so the second stage is, I guess, trying to ask yourself, what rings true from what rings false. Yeah. I do a lot of, sometimes those handwritten first drafts, I can see they're going nowhere, but there might be a core, a kernel in there that could go somewhere. And so start typing the sucker up. And I get in the habit of, once it's in the revision stage, I read over what I worked on the previous day, and I start by making changes to that. Chop away. Where are the faults? Where's the excess? The unneeded beats, the unneeded words, or change. Where can you get the true from the hollow at that stage? And then try to move forward until that thing finds its completion. And for me, the completion is, if there is a tension that creates an arc in that poem, and it's a tension worth exploring, it's leading someplace it's emotionally worth going, has that poem completed its arc? And when I begin to get a sense that it's completed its arc, now, the ending, I think the ending of the poem needs to, in a way, echo the beginning, yet thrust it out, project it into this uncertain space. It's almost like a poem is a spiral, right? There's the trigger of the poem, and it spirals out from the trigger, and the satisfying image at the end thrusts it out, projects it into this open space that continues to linger, while at the same time echoing back to the spiral's heart. I can't lay claim to that. Will Wright came up with that model, right? And it stuck with me, and I'm like, yeah, man, that's how it works. So I know it's finished when, okay, stick the landing. Do you have that, do you have that lingering, resonating, abiding image at the end of the poem that achieves that goal of taking it back to the initial impetus of the trigger, while also drifting out into the open in a way that almost invites you to go back and reread the whole thing? If I feel I've hit that, then I'm like, okay, maybe kind of sort of got a poem now, and if I don't hit that, I'm like, well, 3 out of 10.
Let me ask you to remind people how to get a hold of a copy of your book.
Okay.
Or a couple more poems.
Yeah, first way, and Tim, thanks for putting in the direct link as part of the masthead for this. First way would be to go to the Main Street Rag publishing website, and you look for Robert Lee Kendrick, and you can get the book directly from Main Street Rag. I'll pub them and Scott and his mission. He doesn't jerk with Amazon. He doesn't go through major distributors. He did in the past, but that costs him. And his mission is to, if books pass the screening process and they want to publish it, they just want to get it out there. And there are a hell of a lot of people worth reading out there. And he's just getting poems to the people. So that don't go to other resources. Just go right to the Main Street Rag Publishing Company website. Other way, I figure, if somebody contacts me on Facebook or, email at robertleekendrick@gmail.com, with the whole COVID shit hitting the fan, royal mess this year, there have been things far more significant than poetry readings being canceled. So I don't want to trivialize that, but, no readings. So, you want a book? Hey, man, I'll go to the post office and mail you one. I got no problem with that. So,
Well, how about a couple more poems?
sure. Rise. Frost stings his bare hand when Jacob opens his single wide's door, returns from another night shift. Vaqueros. Then stop a minute. Graveyard. A school district envelope on the table, unopened. Addressed to him now, not his mother. He knows what's inside. Notification of final withdrawal, instructions for taking his GED. It can wait. A new check to cash, a laundromat trip, linoleum floors to sweep, mop. He will not tell Braxton he enjoys collecting the dust and dried mud in the broom pan, the sharp tinge of bleach spray, the patch of gleam he has scrubbed from hard water stains on the faucet. He will not let his 3 rooms turn into his mother's house, somewhere between yard sale and blast site. Her last message blinks on his phone. It can wait. After he seals gaps in the window frames, door. After he chases his shift with cooled coffee. After he takes his meal from the oven. 2 biscuits, recipe half remembered from sophomore year foods. He will not tell Braxton about this either. No wasting $3 on the ones in the hot rack at work. No touching another free one from school again. He will watch his work rise. He will not call them beautiful, a word he has learned to reserve for women. And good isn't quite right for this warm transformation to airy and soft and brown. He will call them his. He will not share them with anyone yet. Not until he discovers how to lighten their centers, how to coax them to keep even shape, how to fix their dry edges, hard crack.
Yeah, that's great.
Very nice.
For time, just want to read one more, 2?
2?
Okay.
Go ahead, 2. Yeah.
Okay, this, that last one was also an I-70 review in that issue, and so was this one. It's the next poem in the sequence. Glide. He thought he was good with a knife, how to run a clean slit from pelvis to jawbone, keep hair from muscle, dance the blade around entrails, windpipe, and not spoil the meat, how to trim skin while sliding the hide. But none of the handles or blades on his board have the skinning knife's curve or will rest in his palm. Broad triangles, straight handles, serrated or smooth, not made for harvesting animal flesh. Jacob admires the just sharpened edges. 4 feet away, freshly washed carrots and celery, round yellow onions, garlic. He's washed them from plates, but never chopped, never peeled, never stood at a prep board. The instructor, Ms. Duncan, a head shorter than Jacob and wiry-armed, shows him again how to hold a chef knife. Fingertips, thumb on the side of the blade, guide hand on the vegetable, one knuckle set gently on steel, measured, short strokes, the fibrous crunch of vegetable flesh. How the orange and green and white layers glow under light, bright with their moisture, the carrot's sweet scent, the celery tang, the nose-stinging punch of the onion. minutes that vanish in sound, scent, and touch. Each knife and grip tonight. Trim beef from bone, mince erms, dice small potatoes, a stew. An evening to be transfixed by tissue, stalk, root, leaf, metal and wood and heat. While he cuts and stirs, tosses and simmers, he no longer stands in Oconee. He floats on the spell from the pot. Last one was published in Main Street Rag, the literary journal from Main Street Rag Press. It's called Shift. And Al, you might appreciate the not so subtle dig here. Louise never studied at Johnson and Wales, the Cordon Bleu College, or the Coulinard School. The brochures that pile on Jacob's one table. Just the last 30 years in kitchens. Lubbock to Memphis to Canton to Knoxville, now Asheville, where he sears filet for the guests who come for the prime rib and golf course, who talk border walls and pay $30 a plate for well done with A1 or ketchup. At his prep station, Jacob pictures spiked shoes and striped shirts, the lake houses a few miles from his mother's Oconee trailer, how a tan northern man looked at him like some kind of bony stray hound when they crossed Frost at the Quick Trip, and cuts his forefinger, thumb. Think all you want after close, says Louise. At your board, your eyes, hands, ears, nose. As he washes the blood, he watches Louise turn steaks in skillets, his dove hands floating from handle to handle, tilting each pan to bathe meat in fat, spooning the brown tops with butter, resting them on a rack to set, steam rising from his glistening, marbled work. The only thing in your world, he says, then pay it no mind when it touches a plate. Left hand in surgical rubber, Jacob returns to his board, plucks the beetroot and carrot roses he planted on trays this afternoon, sleights of hand to tease sight, bright vegetable mandalas, orange and red. No one at a table will know who shaped them. Only the sheen of thinly sliced flesh, the delicate folds, symmetry sparkling in fluorescent light.
That's wonderful. This is Chewing the Gristle, and this has been our poet from up Clemson way, Robert Lee Kendrick. And we want to thank you, Robert, for giving us a wonderful interview and a wonderful reading.
Thank you so much again for hosting this series and bringing poems to the people. Thank you.